Hey guys, tonight we begin with the surprisingly mundane and utterly unremarkable world of yaks, those shaggy giants who spend their days doing absolutely nothing exciting in the harsh mountains of Tibet and Central Asia. While you might expect drama and adventure, the truth is, yak life is incredibly boring, just endless chewing grass, hauling heavy loads and standing around looking unimpressed. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up one morning with the sudden, terrifying realization that those 4 furry sticks attached to your body are supposed to work together. Your legs, at this point, have about as much coordination as chopsticks operated by someone wearing mittens while blindfolded during an earthquake. The concept of walking something every other creature on this mountain seems to have figured out remains as mysterious to you as advanced calculus. Your mother watches from a respectful distance, chewing methodically. She has the expression of someone observing a science experiment that might explode, but probably won't, so she'll keep watching anyway. Her eyes hold that special blend of maternal concern and the dawning horror that she might have produced something defective. Your first attempt at walking could generously be called an interpretive dance titled Gravity Wins Again. You lift one leg, so far, so good. The other 3 legs, apparently unaware of the plan, decide this is the perfect moment to stage a revolt. You tilt left, overcorrect right, and then perform what can only be described as a controlled fall in the direction of some nearby rocks. The rocks remain unimpressed. A passing pika stops to watch, twitching its whiskers in what you're fairly certain is judgment. Even the pikas have figured out walking, and they're basically just fuzzy potatoes with anxiety disorders. This is not encouraging. You attempt to stand again, focusing intensely on the concept of up. Your front legs cooperate reasonably well, pushing your chest off the ground with something approaching dignity. Your back legs, however, seem to be operating on a different physics system entirely. They scramble and slip like they're trying to climb an invisible mountain made of ice and regret. The breakthrough comes on your 7th attempt, when you accidentally discover that walking is less about moving your legs and more about controlled falling in a forward direction. You take one wobbly step, then another, and for a brief, shining moment, you feel like you've cracked the code of existence. This feeling lasts approximately 3 seconds before you trip over your own feet and faceplant into a patch of grass that tastes like disappointment and yak spit. Learning to coordinate 4 legs when you can barely manage your own thoughts becomes your full-time occupation. Each leg seems to have its own opinion about where you should be going and when. Your front left leg is ambitious and tries to lead. Your back right leg is cautious and prefers to double-check every decision. Your front right leg just wants everyone to get along. Your back left leg appears to be asleep most of the time. The worst part isn't the falling, it's the getting up. Every tumble requires a complex negotiation between your legs about who's going to take responsibility for lifting what. By the time you've sorted out the logistics, whatever crisis made you want to move in the first place has usually resolved itself. Then comes the embarrassing incident with the prayer flags. These colourful pieces of fabric flutter in the mountain breeze, attached to ropes strung between posts like some kind of divine laundry line. You're attempting what you optimistically call confident walking when a gust of wind sends the flags snapping and dancing. Being young and stupid, you decide this looks like fun and attempt to investigate. The prayer flags, it turns out, are more aggressive than they appear. Within seconds, you're tangled in a web of colourful fabric, rope, and your own poor life choices. The more you struggle, the more entangled you become, until you're essentially gift-wrapped in Tibetan Buddhist accessories. A group of monks discovers you an hour later, dangling upside down like a very hairy, very embarrassed piñata. The monks free you with the patient resignation of people who've seen this exact scenario play out with various wildlife before. One of them pats your head and says something in a language you don't understand, but the tone clearly translates to, maybe try being less stupid next time. This incident teaches you an important life lesson. Just because something looks interesting doesn't mean you need to become personally involved with it. It's a lesson you'll spend the rest of your life occasionally remembering and frequently ignoring. As you practice walking over the following weeks, you discover that standing still is significantly harder than it looks. When you're moving, even badly, momentum helps hold you upright, but standing requires a constant, conscious effort to keep all 4 legs doing their job simultaneously. It's like trying to balance a table with uneven legs while someone periodically shakes the ground. You watch the adult yaks stand around with what looks like effortless grace, their bodies perfectly still except for the rhythmic motion of their jaws. They make it look as natural as breathing, which only makes your own wobbling more embarrassing. Every time you think you've mastered the art of standing, a breeze comes along and reminds you that you're basically a furry sail attached to 4 unreliable stilts. Your first successful step, not just a lurching stumble or a controlled fall, but an actual, intentional step, happens on a Tuesday morning when you're not even trying. You're focused on a particularly promising patch of grass when your front right leg simply moves forward, followed smoothly by your back left leg. For one perfect moment, you're walking like you were designed for it. The triumph lasts exactly 3 seconds. Then your brain catches up with what's happening, decides to help by overthinking the process, and immediately ruins everything. You crash into the very patch of grass you were trying to reach, which turns out to taste like wet socks and false advertising. But those 3 seconds of perfect walking stay with you. They're proof that somewhere inside your chaotic collection of legs and instincts, there's a yak who knows how to move with purpose. You just have to learn how to get out of your own way long enough to let it happen. Your first survival lesson comes with the grim realization that not all grass is created equal. In fact, most grass falls somewhere on a spectrum between edible and why did I put this in my mouth? This is particularly devastating news when grass constitutes roughly 98% of your available food options. Lesson 1 in yak survival. Find grass that doesn't taste like disappointment. This sounds simple until you realize that disappointment comes in many flavors. There's the bitter disappointment of grass that's too old, the soggy disappointment of grass that's been rained on too much, and the mysterious disappointment of grass that looks perfect, but tastes like someone's been using it as a bathroom. The art of grass evaluation becomes your first real skill. You learn to spot the telltale signs of quality. The right shade of green, not too yellow, not too dark. The proper texture, firm but not tough. And most importantly, the absence of any smell that makes you question your life choices. You develop a systematic approach to grazing that your mother watches with what might be pride, if pride could be expressed through slightly less indifferent chewing. First, you survey the available options with the serious concentration of a food critic at a terrible restaurant. Then you test small samples, learning to distinguish between acceptable and I'd rather eat dirt. The discovery that some grass actually tastes good comes as a genuine shock. There's a patch near the stream where the grass grows sweet and tender, flavored with something that might generously be called not awful. Finding this patch feels like winning a lottery where the prize is not hating your next meal. Strategic grazing, it turns out, is more complex than you initially imagined. It's not just about finding good grass, it's about managing your resources so you don't eat all the good stuff first and spend the rest of the day choking down the botanical equivalent of cardboard. You learn to pace yourself, to save the best patches for when your standards have been worn down by hunger and desperation. The weather, meanwhile, treats survival as a personal insult that must be corrected through aggressive intervention. Your first lesson in weather survival comes during what the adults call a light breeze, and you experience as nature trying to relocate you to a different time zone. Learning when to stand, when to huddle, and when to pretend the wind isn't trying to relocate you becomes a crucial skill. Standing works when the wind is mild and you want to maintain some dignity. Huddling works when the wind gets serious and dignity becomes a luxury you can't afford. Pretending works when the wind reaches the point where acknowledging its existence would require you to admit you're in genuine danger. You develop a personal weather prediction system based on how miserable you feel. Light misery means it's going to be a decent day. Moderate misery suggests you should find shelter soon. Extreme misery means you should have found shelter yesterday. But since time travel isn't available, you'll have to make do with standing very still and hoping for the best. Reading the mountain's moods through cloud patterns becomes your equivalent of checking the weather forecast. Dark clouds bunching up over the peaks mean trouble is coming, usually in the form of precipitation that will make you question every decision that led you to live on a mountain. Wispy clouds stretching across the sky suggest the mountain is feeling contemplative, which usually means you're in for a day of moderate suffering, punctuated by moments of actual pleasantness. Your first real blizzard serves as a masterclass in standing very still, while nature throws a tantrum. The snow comes down like the sky has given up on subtlety and decided to dump all its frozen inventory at once. The wind howls with the fury of someone who's been personally offended by your existence. Your survival strategy during this blizzard consists mainly of finding the largest adult yak available and standing as close to them as social conventions allow. You discover that body heat is shareable, Dignity is optional, and pride is a luxury for creatures who don't live at 14,000 feet above sea level. The blizzard lasts 3 days, during which you learn that boredom is actually a survival skill. When you can't move, can't see more than a few feet in any direction, and have nothing to do except stand still and not die, the ability to be thoroughly bored becomes a competitive advantage. Boredom keeps you calm when panic would waste energy. Boredom helps you conserve your mental resources for actually important decisions, like which direction to face so the wind doesn't freeze your eyeballs. By the end of the blizzard, you've achieved a zen-like state of aggressive indifference. You've learned that most weather is temporary, most discomfort is manageable, and most dramatic situations can be survived by doing as little as possible while waiting for circumstances to improve. The discovery that boredom is a survival skill comes as a revelation. All your life, you've been told that excitement and engagement are valuable traits. But here on the mountain, the yaks who live longest are the ones who've mastered the art of being thoroughly unimpressed by whatever crisis nature decides to throw at them next. You begin to understand that survival isn't about being brave or clever or strong, though those things certainly don't hurt. Survival is about being sufficiently boring that even disasters lose interest in bothering you. It's about developing such a profound sense of indifference that you can stand in the middle of a blizzard and think, well, this is happening, without feeling the need to do anything dramatic about it. This realization shapes your approach to every future crisis. Acknowledge it. Assess whether you can do anything useful about it, and if not, return to chewing grass with the patient resignation of someone who's seen it all before and wasn't particularly impressed the first time. Meeting the herd for the first time is like being introduced to a collection of walking rugs with opinions, most of them negative. Each yak has developed their own distinct personality, which in practice means they've each found their own unique way to be unimpressed by existence. The herd operates on a social hierarchy so complex it makes international diplomacy look straightforward. At first glance, it appears to be based on size, age, and general grumpiness levels. But after weeks of observation, you realize it's actually based on something far more mysterious. Who can project the most convincing aura of not caring about anything while simultaneously caring deeply about everything? At the top of this hierarchy sits Elder Chomper, a yak who looks like someone crossed a mountain with a bad attitude and then covered the result in fur that's seen better decades. Chomper has achieved that perfect yak ideal. She's simultaneously the most and least engaged member of the herd. She pays attention to everything while appearing to care about nothing, and somehow this makes her the unofficial leader of a group that officially doesn't believe in leadership. Chomper has the demeanor of a grumpy librarian who's spent too many years watching people mishandle books. She knows where everyone should be, what they should be eating, and when they should be doing it. But she's too dignified to actually tell anyone directly. Instead, she communicates through a complex system of meaningful stares, deliberate positioning, and the occasional grunt that carries more authority than most speeches. Your first interaction with Chomper occurs when you accidentally wander into what you later learn is her preferred morning grazing spot. She doesn't say anything. Yaks rarely waste energy on unnecessary communication, but she fixes you with a look that clearly states, "Young creature, you are standing in my spot. You know you are standing in my spot. I know you are standing in my spot. And we both know you're going to move because this conversation is already over. You move. Not because you're intimidated, you tell yourself, but because the grass over there looks just as good, and standing in someone else's spot seems like more drama than you're prepared to handle before breakfast." Learning your place in the pecking order becomes an exercise in accepting that your place is, unsurprisingly, near the bottom. This isn't necessarily a criticism of your character, it's simply a mathematical reality. You're young, small, and still occasionally fall over for no apparent reason. In a hierarchy based on competence and gravitas, you're essentially a furry disaster with legs. The pecking order, you discover, is maintained through a system so subtle that most of the enforcement happens through meaningful glances and strategic positioning. Higher-ranking yaks get first access to the good grass, the best shelter spots, and the privilege of standing in whatever configuration they find most comfortable. Lower-ranking yaks, like yourself, get whatever's left over, and the opportunity to learn patience through suffering. But the system isn't entirely unfair. It comes with certain protections. Higher-ranking yaks are expected to share their knowledge about weather patterns, predator behavior, and which tourists are most likely to hand out treats. They serve as early warning systems for the herd, using their experience to guide group decisions about when to move, where to graze, and whether that sound in the distance is worth investigating or ignoring. Yak communication operates on a principle of maximum efficiency and minimum effort. The basic vocabulary consists of grunt once for yes, grunt twice for I'm thinking about it, grunt 3 times for absolutely not, and a long, dramatic sigh for this conversation is already more effort than I wanted to expend today. More complex communications happen through body language. Ear position indicates mood and attention level. Tail movement suggests emotional state and immediate intentions. The angle of the head while grazing communicates everything from this grass is acceptable to I'm pretending to graze while actually eavesdropping on your conversation. You learn to read these signals through trial and error, mostly error. Your first attempt at communicating friendly interest apparently comes across as mild aggression with social anxiety. Your effort to project casual confidence gets interpreted as possible digestive distress. It takes weeks of practice before you can successfully communicate basic concepts like, I would like to stand near you, without accidentally insulting someone's mother. The great grass dispute of your 3rd month serves as your introduction to yak politics at its most dramatic, which is to say, barely visible to the untrained observer. The conflict begins when 2 middle-ranking yaks, Pemba and Tashi, develop competing claims to a particularly sweet patch of grass near the stream. To human eyes, the dispute would be invisible, just 2 yaks grazing in roughly the same area, occasionally looking at each other. But to yak eyes, it's a complex negotiation involving territorial boundaries, grazing rights, social standing, and the fundamental question of who has the moral authority to eat specific plants. The dispute escalates over several days through a series of increasingly passive-aggressive maneuvers. Pemba begins grazing in a pattern that subtly but definitively claims the eastern half of the patch. Tashi responds by establishing a strategic grazing position that blocks Pemba's access to the sweetest grass. Pemba counters by recruiting her cousin Norbu to graze nearby, creating a buffer zone of allied yaks. The conflict reaches its climax when both yaks arrive at the disputed patch at exactly the same time on a Tuesday morning. They stand facing each other across 3 feet of contested grass, neither willing to back down, neither willing to escalate to actual confrontation. For 20 minutes, they engage in the yak equivalent of a staring contest, occasionally taking calculated bites of grass to demonstrate their commitment to their positions. The rest of the herd gathers at a respectful distance to watch, not because the outcome matters to them, but because it's the most interesting thing that's happened in weeks. The resolution comes when Elder Chomper wanders over, positions herself directly in the middle of the disputed patch, and begins eating the contested grass with the unhurried efficiency of someone who's too old to care about other people's problems. Pemba and Tashi, faced with the choice between challenging a respected elder or finding somewhere else to eat breakfast, choose to relocate their ambitions to a less politically complex patch of vegetation. The incident teaches you that most yak arguments are resolved by whoever cares less, and that sometimes the best solution to a complex problem is to let someone with more authority eat the problem entirely. It's a lesson that will serve you well in future conflicts, both territorial and philosophical. You begin to understand that yak society operates on principles that seem contradictory, but actually make perfect sense. Everyone has opinions, but expressing them directly is considered poor form. Everyone cares about the social order, but pretending not to care is essential for maintaining your position within it. Everyone wants the best resources, but appearing too eager is a sign of weakness. It's a system built on the understanding that life is too short and grass too abundant to waste energy on unnecessary drama, but too long and resources too precious to let other yaks walk all over you without some form of subtle resistance. As you settle into your place in this complex social ecosystem, you realize you're learning more than just survival skills. You're learning the art of living with others who share your space, your resources, and your fundamental approach to existence, doing whatever is necessary to get by, with as little fuss as possible, while maintaining just enough dignity to look yourself in the mirror each morning and not feel completely embarrassed by what you see. Adolescence hits you like a slow-motion avalanche made of hormones and confusion. One morning you wake up, and your body has apparently decided to undergo renovations without consulting you first. Everything feels slightly wrong, like someone rearranged your apartment while you were sleeping, but instead of furniture, they moved your legs, your voice, and your general sense of coordination. Your voice cracks, but since your primary form of communication is grunting, nobody notices. This is simultaneously disappointing and relieving. On one hand, you're going through a significant developmental milestone that deserves some acknowledgement. On the other hand, The last thing you need is Elder Chomper, giving you meaningful looks about your vocal changes while you're trying to maintain what little dignity you have left. The voice cracks happen at the most inconvenient moments. You'll be attempting to communicate something important, like, "I would like to graze near you," or "That cloud formation looks ominous," and instead of your usual confident grunt, what emerges is a sound like a rusty gate being operated by someone with arthritis. The other yaks politely pretend not to notice, which only makes it more embarrassing. Growing into your coat becomes a daily exercise in looking like someone wearing their older brother's clothes to a formal event. Your winter coat, which fit perfectly fine last season, now seems to hang off you in all the wrong places, while simultaneously being too tight in others. Your shoulders have broadened, but your coat apparently didn't get the memo. Your legs have lengthened, leaving you with what appears to be furry ankle warmers instead of proper leg coverage. The coat situation becomes particularly awkward during windy days, when the loose sections flap around like furry flags announcing your adolescent awkwardness to anyone within visual range. You spend considerable time trying to position yourself so the wind blows your coat in a way that suggests intentional style rather than accidental comedy. You enter the phase where your legs are longer than your common sense, which creates a whole new category of problems. Distances that used to require careful planning now seem deceptively manageable, leading to a series of miscalculations that would be embarrassing if they weren't so consistently predictable. You'll spot a patch of grass that looks easily reachable, stride confidently toward it, and discover that your new leg length has thrown off your spatial reasoning entirely. The leg situation is complicated by the fact that they seem to be growing at different rates. Your front legs achieve their adult length first, giving you the appearance of a furry giraffe that gave up halfway through the transformation. This creates a perpetual forward lean that makes you look either very eager or very tired, depending on the angle and lighting. Your first attempts at looking intimidating are about as effective as a threatening pillow. You've observed the adult males during their occasional displays of dominance, the way they lower their heads, puff out their chests, and project an aura of barely contained power. You attempt to replicate this behavior and succeed mainly in looking like you're experiencing digestive distress while trying to remember where you left something important. The intimidation attempts become more elaborate as your confidence grows, which unfortunately makes them less rather than more effective. You try adding a dramatic pause before your intimidating grunt, but the pause lasts too long, and by the time you grunt, everyone has moved on to other activities. You experiment with strategic positioning, placing yourself between other yaks and resources, but your timing is off, and you usually end up blocking access to things nobody wanted anyway. The realization that your intimidation skills need work comes during an encounter with a particularly small female yak, who responds to your best dominance display by yawning and then continuing to graze in exactly the spot you were trying to claim. She doesn't even acknowledge your presence beyond a brief glance that clearly communicates, "Are you finished?" Because this grass isn't going to eat itself. Learning to chew with purpose, rather than just optimism, becomes one of your major developmental achievements. As a younger yak, you approached eating with the enthusiasm of someone who believed that if you just chewed hard enough and fast enough, even terrible grass might magically become delicious. This strategy was admirable in its determination, but limited in its practical effectiveness. Purposeful chewing, you discover, is both an art and a science. It requires assessment of the grass quality before committing fully to the eating process. You learn to take small test bites, evaluating texture, moisture content, and that indefinable quality that separates food from fibrous disappointment. You develop a personal rating system. Grade A grass gets the full ceremonial chewing experience, Grade B grass gets efficient processing, and Grade C grass gets the minimum effort required to extract some nutritional value without dwelling on the experience. The technique of purposeful chewing also involves strategic jaw movement. Instead of the frantic chomping of your youth, you learn to chew with deliberate rhythm, maximizing the breakdown of tough fibers while conserving energy for more important activities, like standing around looking contemplative. You begin to notice that your chewing has developed its own distinctive sound pattern, different from the casual munching of your childhood and distinct from the meditative chewing of the elders. It's the sound of someone who's figured out how eating works but is still working out the finer points of efficiency and grace. The most significant realization of this period is that you're becoming impressively average, and somehow this feels like an achievement rather than a disappointment. For months, you've been either too small, too clumsy, too young, or too confused to fit properly into yak society. But gradually, you notice that your problems are becoming ordinary problems, your mistakes are becoming routine mistakes, and your successes are becoming the kind of modest accomplishments that don't attract unwanted attention. Being impressively average means you can graze in mixed groups without anyone feeling the need to supervise your grass selection decisions. It means you can participate in group migrations without everyone worrying that you'll wander off and get lost. Or worse, need to be rescued from some embarrassing predicament involving prayer flags or tourist photography. Averageness brings a kind of social invisibility that you discover you actually enjoy. Nobody expects great things from you, but nobody assumes you'll be a complete disaster either. You've achieved that perfect yak middle ground, competent enough to be trusted with basic responsibilities, not ambitious enough to be seen as a threat to the established order. The comfort of being average extends to your daily routine. You've developed patterns that work, specific grazing circuits that provide adequate nutrition without requiring heroic effort, preferred standing spots that offer good views without putting you in anyone's way, and a general approach to life that minimizes both excitement and disappointment. You realize you've successfully navigated the transition from young yak who might do anything to adolescent yak who will probably do the expected thing adequately. It's not the most thrilling character development, but it's remarkably peaceful. And peace, you're beginning to understand, is underrated. Your first solo expedition begins with the ambitious goal of exploring the area immediately around your usual grazing grounds and ends with the humbling discovery that you can get lost within sight of home. The expedition starts confidently enough you've been watching the landscape for months. And how hard can it be to navigate terrain you see every day? The answer, it turns out, is surprisingly hard. Familiar landmarks have a disturbing tendency to look completely different from new angles. The distinctive rock formation that's been your North Star for months becomes unrecognizable when viewed from the other side. The stream that's always been a reliable reference point apparently has multiple branches, all of which look identical when you're standing in the middle of them, trying to remember which one leads home. Your navigation strategy, such as it is, relies heavily on the assumption that if you can see where you started, you can probably figure out how to get back there. This assumption proves flawed when you discover that seeing where you started and knowing how to get there are entirely different skills, and you've only mastered the first one. The low point of your expedition comes when you spend an hour walking in what you're certain is the right direction, only to end up back at your starting point having approached it from the opposite side. This suggests either that you've mastered the art of walking in a perfect circle, or that the mountain has a sense of humor and enjoys watching young yaks wander around in confused patterns. Learning to read the landscape like a very boring book becomes your next major project. Unlike an actual book, the landscape doesn't have chapters, page numbers, or a helpful table of contents. Instead, it offers subtle variations in grass color, barely perceptible changes in slope angle, and rock formations that look significant until you try to use them as landmarks and discover they all look essentially the same. You develop a system of landscape literacy based on multiple reference points rather than single landmarks. The big boulder near the stream, combined with the twisted tree on the ridge, plus the specific angle of the mountain peaks in the distance, creates a unique signature that's harder to misinterpret than any single feature. It's like reading a book where every page looks similar, but the combination of words creates meaning. Wind patterns become your equivalent of street signs. The way the breeze hits your face in different locations provides consistent directional information. Once you learn to distinguish between wind from the valley and wind from the peaks, and wind that's just confused and coming from everywhere at once. Each area has its own microclimate, signature, and learning to read these subtle differences turns navigation from guesswork into something approaching science. The incident with the tourist who thought you were exotic provides an unexpected lesson in human behavior and your own developing sense of dignity. You're engaged in routine grazing when a human appears with one of those mechanical devices they use to capture images. The human begins making excited noises and pointing the device in your direction with the enthusiasm of someone who's discovered something rare and wonderful. You pause your grazing to assess the situation. The human is clearly harmless. They're wearing bright colors and making no attempt at stealth, which rules out predator behavior. But their excitement level seems disproportionate to the circumstance. You're just eating grass in the same location you eat grass every day, performing the same activities you've been performing for months. If this qualifies as exotic, the human standards for excitement are remarkably low. The human creeps closer, making what you assume are encouraging sounds, possibly under the impression that you're some kind of rare wildlife rather than a fairly standard example of local livestock. They seem particularly fascinated by your coat, which you have to admit is looking quite good this season, and your horns, which have grown to a respectable size without becoming unwieldy, you decide to give the human what they seem to want, a good photo opportunity while maintaining your dignity. You continue grazing at a pace that allows for clear image capture while occasionally looking up with what you hope is an appropriately noble expression. The human's excitement reaches levels that suggest they've never seen a yak before, which seems unlikely given that you're literally surrounded by other yaks doing identical activities. The encounter ends when the human's excitement causes them to step backward into a patch of soft ground, resulting in a brief but entertaining display of human instability. You watch with mild interest as they regain their footing and retreat to a safer distance, apparently satisfied with their exotic wildlife experience. Finding your favorite grazing spots through trial and mostly error becomes a process of systematic exploration combined with lucky accidents. You develop criteria for evaluating potential grazing areas: grass quality, wind protection, drainage, proximity to water, and what you privately call the ambiance factor, that indefinable quality that makes some places feel comfortable and others feel like you're trespassing. Your first major discovery is a sheltered area behind a cluster of rocks, where the grass grows thick and sweet, protected from the worst winds by natural barriers. The location offers excellent sightlines for monitoring the rest of the herd, while providing enough privacy to graze without feeling like you're performing for an audience. The second discovery comes when you notice that certain slopes receive different amounts of sunlight throughout the day, creating microclimates with varying grass characteristics. The morning slopes offer tender grass that's perfect for starting the day, while the afternoon slopes provide heartier vegetation that satisfies hunger without requiring extensive chewing time. Understanding wind patterns evolves from basic survival necessity to sophisticated weather prediction. You learn that wind isn't just something that makes you cold, it's nature's way of providing free weather updates for anyone smart enough to interpret the signals. Wind direction tells you about incoming weather systems. Wind speed indicates the severity of approaching conditions, and wind consistency helps you predict how long current conditions will last. Different types of wind carry distinct information. The steady wind from the valley suggests stable conditions that will probably continue. Gusty, changeable wind indicates weather systems in transition, usually meaning conditions will change soon, but not necessarily for the better. The complete absence of wind is often the most ominous sign of all, suggesting that nature is holding its breath before unleashing something dramatic. You develop the ability to sense weather changes hours before they arrive by reading subtle shifts in wind patterns. This skill proves invaluable for planning grazing activities, finding appropriate shelter, and positioning yourself in the herd's daily movements. Being able to predict weather makes you slightly useful to the other yaks, which represents a significant upgrade in your social status. The day you discovered a patch of grass that didn't taste like regret becomes a personal holiday worth celebrating. After months of accepting that most grass falls somewhere between tolerable and why do I live here, finding genuinely good grass feels like discovering buried treasure. If buried treasure were edible and grew in convenient yak-sized portions, the magic grass grows in a small depression near a seasonal stream, where runoff creates perfect growing conditions without turning the area into a muddy mess. The grass is tender without being weak, flavorful without being weird, and abundant enough that you can eat your fill without depleting the resource for future visits. You establish a policy of visiting this spot only when you've had a particularly difficult day or when the regular grass has been especially disappointing. This rationing strategy ensures that the good grass remains a special treat rather than becoming another routine expectation, and it gives you something to look forward to during periods when life feels like an endless sequence of standing around eating things that taste like vegetable sadness. The discovery also teaches you that the landscape holds secrets worth discovering, and that patient exploration sometimes rewards you with genuinely pleasant surprises. It's a lesson that encourages continued curiosity about your environment while maintaining realistic expectations about what you're likely to find. Summer arrives like a friend who remembers your birthday, but only barely. When life is almost pleasant, if you squint and don't think too hard about it, you know you've reached peak Tibetan summer. The temperatures rise to levels that qualify as not actively trying to kill you. The grass achieves something approaching actual flavor, and for a few months, survival requires more effort than standing still and not dying. Summer brings the luxury of choice. Instead of eating whatever vegetation hasn't been destroyed by cold, wind, or general mountain hostility, you can actually be selective about your meals. Different patches of grass develop distinct characteristics in the warmer weather. Some become sweet, others develop interesting textures, and a few achieve that magical combination of nutrition and flavor that makes eating feel like less of a chore. The longer daylight hours of summer create scheduling opportunities that don't exist during the other seasons. You can graze in the early morning when the grass is fresh with dew, take a midday break for standing around and contemplating the landscape, and return to eating during the extended evening hours when the light is soft and the wind has calmed down. But summer also brings complications. The improved conditions attract tourists who seem to believe that warmer weather makes wildlife more photogenic. You spend increasing amounts of time posing for photographs taken by humans, who apparently find your basic existence noteworthy. While the attention is flattering, it interferes with your grazing schedule and occasionally results in humans approaching close enough to require evasive action. The heat, while pleasant compared to the alternatives, creates its own challenges. You learn to seek shade during the warmest parts of the day, not because the temperature is dangerous, but because standing in direct sunlight while wearing a permanent fur coat becomes uncomfortably warm. Finding the right balance between sun exposure for warmth and shade for cooling becomes a daily optimization problem. Autumn arrives like nature's way of saying, "Hope you enjoyed that," with a tone that suggests you probably didn't appreciate summer nearly enough while you had it. The temperatures begin their steady decline toward winter levels. The grass starts its annual transition from food to fibrous survival rations, and the daylight hours shrink with the urgency of someone trying to finish an important project before a deadline. Autumn is the season of preparation, which sounds organized and purposeful, until you realize that preparation mainly consists of eating as much as possible while food is still available, and hoping your winter coat grows in properly this year. You join the rest of the herd in a collective effort to consume every edible plant within reasonable traveling distance, creating a pastoral scene that would look peaceful to observers who don't understand the underlying desperation. The changing weather patterns of autumn provide excellent training in reading environmental signals. Cloud formations that looked merely interesting during summer now carry important information about incoming storm systems. Wind patterns that were pleasant during warmer months now hint at the brutal conditions to come. Every beautiful sunset comes with the subtext of, "Enjoy this, because it's going to be a while before weather is this nice again." Your coat begins its annual transformation from adequate summer coverage to portable housing system, a process that involves shedding your lighter summer fur while simultaneously growing the dense winter coat that will keep you alive during the months ahead. This creates a period where you look like you're molting while also appearing increasingly fuzzy, a combination that does nothing for your dignity, but everything for your survival prospects. Winter descends like a 4-month exercise in strategic suffering, designed to test whether you've learned enough about survival to deserve to see another spring. The temperatures drop to levels that make summer seem like a distant dream, possibly experienced by a different yak in a different life. The wind develops a personal vendetta against any exposed skin, and pursues this vendetta with the dedication of someone who enjoys their work. Winter survival becomes a daily exercise in energy conservation and strategic positioning. Every decision, where to stand, when to move, how much energy to spend on any given activity carries weight, because mistakes in winter have consequences that range from uncomfortable to fatal. You learn to move with deliberate efficiency, avoiding unnecessary energy expenditure, while maintaining the activity levels needed to keep your circulation functioning. The shortened daylight hours compress your daily routine into a narrow window of usable time. Grazing, socializing, and travel must all be accomplished during the brief period when visibility and temperature make these activities feasible. The rest of the time is spent in what you learn to think of as conservation mode, standing still, staying warm, and waiting for conditions to improve. Finding adequate shelter becomes a crucial skill that involves more than just getting out of the wind. Good winter shelter provides protection from precipitation, blocks the worst wind, offers some warmth retention, and allows for quick escape if predators decide that winter is a good time to supplement their diets with yak. You learn to evaluate potential shelter sites based on multiple criteria, because being warm but trapped is only marginally better than being cold but free. Spring returns like optimism made manifest, bringing with it the return of hope, longer days, and mud that seems designed to make walking as difficult as possible while somehow still being better than winter. The warming temperatures feel like a personal gift from the universe, even when warming means only occasionally below freezing rather than anything that would qualify as actually warm. Spring brings confusion along with optimism, as your body readjusts to the concept that survival might involve more than just enduring until tomorrow. Your winter survival instincts, perfectly tuned for months of scarcity and conservation, struggle to adapt to the new reality of improving conditions and increasing daylight. You find yourself continuing winter behaviors out of habit, even when they're no longer necessary. The grass begins its annual resurrection, transforming from brown stuff that technically qualifies as food to green stuff that might actually have nutritional value. This transition happens gradually, requiring daily assessment of whether the new growth is ready for consumption or still in the optimistic but inedible stage of development. Your winter coat, so essential for survival during the cold months, becomes increasingly burdensome as temperatures rise. The shedding process creates a weeks-long period where you look like you're disintegrating, leaving trails of fur wherever you go, and creating the impression that you're either molting or suffering from some exotic yak disease. Learning to find shelter that doesn't involve sharing space with pikas becomes an important skill, since pikas have very different ideas about personal space, noise levels, and appropriate bathroom etiquette. While pikas are generally harmless, they're also remarkably energetic and chatty, qualities that become exhausting when you're trying to rest after a long day of standing around eating grass. You discover that the best shelters are those that appear unappealing to smaller creatures, too large for pikas to find cozy, too exposed for most predators to find convenient, but just right for a yak who needs protection from wind and precipitation without unwanted roommates. These locations often involve some compromise, but the privacy makes up for any minor deficiencies in comfort or convenience. The art of growing a winter coat that doubles as portable housing becomes something you perfect through trial and mostly error. Your first winter coat was adequate but unrefined, warm enough to keep you alive, but not sophisticated enough to provide real comfort during extreme conditions. Each subsequent winter brings improvements as you learn to optimize coat density, length, and distribution. Growing the perfect winter coat involves understanding your own body's patterns and working with them rather than against them. You learn which areas need extra insulation, which areas benefit from air circulation, and how to achieve the right balance between warmth, retention, and mobility. The goal is to create a personal climate control system that functions effectively in a wide range of conditions. Your first successful migration represents a triumph of following everyone else while pretending you know where you're going. The herd's seasonal movements follow patterns established over generations, routes that optimize grazing opportunities, water access, and shelter availability throughout the year. As a younger yak, you simply follow along, but as you mature, you begin to understand the logic behind the movement patterns. The migration teaches you that successful travel is less about knowing the destination and more about understanding the journey. Each day's movement is planned based on current conditions, available resources, and the herd's overall energy levels. Flexibility is more important than rigid adherence to predetermined routes, and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances often determines the difference between a successful migration and a costly mistake. You learn to read the subtle signals that indicate when the herd is preparing to move, how to position yourself for optimal travel efficiency, and when to conserve energy for the challenges ahead. The migration becomes a master class in group dynamics, resource management, and the art of covering long distances without any individual yak needing to make heroic efforts. By the end of your first full seasonal cycle, you've developed a deep appreciation for the predictable rhythms of mountain life and the skills necessary to thrive within those rhythms. Each season brings its own challenges and rewards, and mastering the transitions between them represents a crucial step in your development from confused adolescent to competent adult yak. The gradual realization that you're no longer completely helpless arrives not with fanfare or dramatic revelation, but with the quiet recognition that you've stopped looking for adults to solve your problems. It's a Tuesday morning like any other, when you notice that the patch of grass you're considering doesn't automatically trigger the thought, "I should check with someone about this." Instead, you simply evaluate the grass on its own merits, color, texture, probable flavor profile, and make a decision based on your own accumulated experience and personal preferences. This moment of independence is simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. For months, you've been operating under the comfortable assumption that any major mistakes you make will be caught and corrected by older, wiser yaks who have your best interests at heart. The realization that you're now expected to be the older, wiser yak in your own decision-making process comes with a weight of responsibility you didn't anticipate. Your newfound independence manifests in small but significant ways. You begin choosing your own grazing routes rather than following the established paths of the herd. You start making independent assessments of weather conditions, instead of waiting for the elders to signal when it's time to seek shelter. Most importantly, you develop your own opinions about which grass is worth the effort, and which should be left for less discriminating yaks. The process of developing independent judgment turns out to be more complex than simply making your own choices. Independence requires not just the ability to decide, but the wisdom to know when your decisions are likely to be wrong and the humility to seek advice when necessary. You learn to distinguish between situations where your experience is adequate and situations where consultation with more experienced yaks might prevent embarrassing or dangerous mistakes. Your first successful intimidation of a smaller yak provides a moment of triumph that tastes remarkably like grass, but grass seasoned with the satisfying flavor of personal achievement. The incident occurs during a minor territorial dispute over a particularly appealing patch of clover-enriched vegetation. A young female yak, perhaps 2 seasons younger than yourself, approaches your chosen grazing area with what appears to be the intention of sharing the space. Under normal circumstances, sharing would be the polite and practical solution. There's plenty of grass for both of you, and yak society generally favors cooperation over conflict, but something about her approach triggers your newly developed sense of territorial authority. Perhaps it's the casual way she assumes you'll accommodate her presence, or maybe it's your own need to test whether you've developed any actual ability to assert yourself in social situations. You position yourself between the newcomer and the best portion of the grazing area, adopting what you hope is a posture of calm but unmistakable authority. You lower your head slightly, not in an aggressive manner, but in a way that suggests you're prepared to become aggressive if circumstances require it. Most importantly, you maintain steady eye contact while continuing to graze, communicating that you're relaxed enough to eat but alert enough to defend your position. The younger yak pauses, apparently reassessing the situation. She glances at you, then at the grass, then back at you, clearly calculating whether challenging your claim is worth the potential conflict. After a moment that feels much longer than it probably is, she redirects her attention to a different area, leaving you in undisputed possession of your chosen spot. The victory is modest by any objective measure. You've successfully discouraged a smaller yak from eating grass in your immediate vicinity. But the psychological impact is significant. For the first time, you've successfully projected authority and had that authority recognized and respected by another yak. It's a small step toward the kind of quiet confidence that characterizes successful adult yaks. Learning to navigate without constantly looking over your shoulder for guidance becomes an exercise in developing trust in your own instincts. As a younger yak, you relied heavily on visual confirmation that you were following the correct path, staying with the appropriate group, and making decisions that aligned with herd expectations. Adult navigation requires the confidence to commit to a direction and continue moving even when you can't see immediate confirmation that you're making the right choice. Your first successful solo navigation occurs during a routine grazing expedition, when you become separated from your usual companions due to a combination of fog and your own inattention. Instead of panicking or calling for help, you pause to assess your situation using the navigation skills you've been developing over the past seasons. You identify several reliable landmarks: the distinctive rock formation to the east, the sound of running water indicating the stream's location, and the general slope of the terrain suggesting your position relative to the main grazing areas. Using these reference points, you plot a course that should intersect with familiar territory, then commit to following that course without second-guessing every decision. The navigation exercise succeeds partly through skill and partly through luck, but the important lesson is that you maintained confidence in your decision-making process even when uncertainty created anxiety. You learn to distinguish between the productive worry that helps you pay attention to important details and the counterproductive worry that undermines your ability to act decisively. The discovery that standing confidently is different from just standing represents a subtle but important development in your understanding of yak body language and social positioning. Standing, in its basic form, is simply a matter of keeping your legs underneath you while maintaining enough balance to avoid falling over. Confident standing involves projecting intentionality, authority, and calm alertness through posture, positioning, and the subtle signals that communicate your mental state to other yaks. Confident standing requires attention to multiple elements simultaneously: the angle of your head, which should suggest awareness without anxiety; the positioning of your legs, which should appear stable without seeming rigid; and the overall energy you project, which should indicate that you're prepared to act if necessary, but comfortable with the current situation. The difference becomes apparent in how other yaks respond to your presence. When you're simply standing, other yaks treat you as a neutral element in the landscape, neither threatening nor particularly interesting. When you're standing confidently, other yaks acknowledge your presence with the subtle recognition that you're a participant in the social environment, rather than just a furry obstacle taking up space. You practice confident standing during various routine activities, gradually learning to maintain the appropriate posture and energy level, even when you're focused on other tasks. The skill proves particularly useful during interactions with unfamiliar yaks, where first impressions can influence the entire course of the relationship. Mastering the art of selective hearing when humans approach with cameras becomes a crucial survival skill in an environment increasingly populated by tourists who seem to believe that yaks exist primarily for photographic purposes. The challenge lies in maintaining awareness of your surroundings, while appearing sufficiently absorbed in routine activities that humans feel comfortable approaching for pictures. The key to selective hearing involves developing the ability to monitor human activity through peripheral awareness, while avoiding direct engagement that might encourage unwanted interaction. You learn to recognize the distinctive sounds of camera equipment, the excited whispers that indicate you've been spotted, and the cautious footsteps of humans attempting to get closer for better photographs. Your strategy involves continuing normal activities, grazing, standing, occasional movement, while subtly positioning yourself to control the photographic opportunities available to humans. If you want to discourage photography, you can position yourself so your rear end faces the cameras, or you can begin moving just as humans get their equipment ready. If you're feeling cooperative, you can provide profile views, maintain photogenic positions, and generally behave in ways that result in satisfactory pictures with minimal human intrusion. The selective hearing skill proves most valuable during peak tourist season, when your grazing areas become crowded with humans carrying increasingly sophisticated photography equipment. Your ability to appear natural and undisturbed while maintaining control over human access helps preserve the peaceful environment necessary for effective grazing and social interaction. Your first winter survived entirely through your own questionable decisions represents a milestone that's equal parts achievement and accident. Previous winters involved following the lead of more experienced yaks, relying on their knowledge of seasonal patterns, weather prediction, and resource management. This winter, circumstances conspire to leave you largely responsible for your own survival strategies. The winter begins, promisingly enough, with adequate food stores, reasonable shelter options, and weather patterns that align with your expectations based on previous years. Your confidence in your preparation proves somewhat optimistic when an early blizzard depletes your primary food cache and blocks access to your preferred shelter locations. Your response to this crisis involves a series of decisions that range from inspired improvisation to questionable risk-taking. You relocate to a secondary shelter site that offers adequate wind protection but requires longer travel times to reach decent grazing areas. You adjust your feeding schedule to take advantage of brief weather windows, sometimes grazing in conditions that more prudent yaks would consider inadvisable. The winter survival strategy succeeds through a combination of careful resource management, lucky weather breaks, and your willingness to accept discomfort in exchange for maintaining access to necessary resources. You learn to distinguish between genuine emergencies that require immediate action and temporary hardships that can be endured through patience and strategic waiting. Most importantly, you develop confidence in your ability to adapt to changing circumstances without relying on external guidance or support. The winter teaches you that survival often depends less on perfect planning than on the ability to make reasonable decisions under pressure and to learn from mistakes quickly enough to avoid repeating them. The psychological impact of successful independent winter survival extends beyond the immediate accomplishment. You enter the following spring with a fundamentally different relationship to your environment and your own capabilities. You've proven to yourself that you can handle serious challenges independently, which provides a foundation of confidence that influences every subsequent decision and interaction. Your newfound confidence manifests in various aspects of daily life. You're more assertive in territorial disputes, more adventurous in your grazing explorations, and more willing to take social risks that might have seemed too dangerous when you doubted your ability to handle the consequences independently. The winter survival experience also teaches you about the value of preparation without over-preparation. You learn to distinguish between reasonable precautions that improve your odds of success and excessive worry that wastes energy without providing proportional benefits. This balance becomes particularly important as you take on increased responsibilities within the herd's social structure. As your confidence grows, you begin to notice that other yaks are treating you differently. Younger yaks occasionally seek your opinion on grazing decisions or weather assessment. Peer-aged yaks include you in planning discussions for group activities. Even some older yaks acknowledge your contributions to herd decision-making, recognizing that your combination of recent experience and developing judgment provides a valuable perspective on current conditions. The transition from dependent adolescent to confident young adult happens gradually, marked by small victories and incremental improvements in your decision-making abilities. Each successful independent choice builds on previous successes, creating a foundation of experience that supports increasingly sophisticated problem-solving and social navigation. By the end of this developmental period, you've established yourself as a competent young adult yak with a track record of reasonable decision-making and successful problem-solving. You've learned to balance independence with community cooperation, confidence with appropriate caution, and personal ambition with social responsibility. These skills prepare you for the more complex challenges of territorial management, resource competition, and the social dynamics that define adult yak society. Claiming your first grazing spot represents the transition from guest to property owner in the complex world of yak real estate. The patch you select for your territorial debut has decent reviews from previous occupants, relatively sweet grass, adequate drainage, good sightlines for predator detection, and most importantly, a location that doesn't put you in direct conflict with any of the established territorial powerhouses who might object to your presumptuous land grab. The grass patch itself isn't particularly impressive by objective standards. It's roughly 15 square meters of mixed vegetation, growing on a gentle slope that receives morning sun but afternoon shade. The grass quality rates somewhere between acceptable and not terrible, with occasional patches of clover that elevate the dining experience from subsistence grazing to actually pleasant eating. What makes this patch significant isn't its exceptional quality, but its availability and your readiness to commit to defending it. The previous occupant, an elderly female named Yang Chen, relocated to a smaller, easier-to-maintain territory closer to the main herd, leaving behind a power vacuum that several young yaks have been eyeing with varying degrees of interest and courage. Your decision to claim this particular spot involves extensive reconnaissance and strategic timing. You spend several days observing the location at different times, noting traffic patterns, assessing the quality of resources during various weather conditions, and most importantly, gauging the level of interest from potential competitors. The reconnaissance reveals that while several other yaks have considered the territory, none have committed to the sustained presence necessary to establish a legitimate claim. The claiming process itself proves anticlimactically successful. You begin spending progressively longer periods in the territory, gradually extending your stays from brief visits to half-day grazing sessions to eventual overnight occupation. Each stage of the process involves subtle psychological warfare, as you project increasing confidence in your right to be there while monitoring for signs of challenge from other interested parties. The first week of territorial ownership provides valuable lessons in property management. You discover that owning territory involves more than just exclusive grazing rights. It requires ongoing maintenance, vigilance against encroachment, and the diplomatic skills necessary to manage boundaries with neighboring territory holders. You learn to distinguish between innocent passage through your territory and deliberate testing of your resolve to defend your claims. Your territorial management strategy emphasizes reasonable flexibility over rigid enforcement. You allow passage for yaks traveling to other destinations, permit brief grazing by visitors during abundant periods, and maintain cordial relationships with neighbors who respect appropriate boundaries. This approach proves more sustainable than aggressive exclusion, which would require more energy than you're prepared to invest in territorial defense. The ongoing negotiation with Tenzin, the yak who thinks he owns everything, becomes a defining feature of your territorial experience. Tenzin operates under the apparent assumption that any unoccupied space within his considerable sphere of awareness represents unclaimed territory available for his expansion. Your patch, being adjacent to his established holdings, attracts his attention as a natural addition to his already extensive domain. Tenzin's approach to territorial expansion involves a combination of subtle encroachment and casual assumption of access rights. He begins by grazing slightly closer to your boundary than previous patterns would suggest, testing whether you notice and respond to the intrusion. When you maintain polite but firm boundary enforcement, he escalates to occasional grazing within your territory, always with an air of absent-minded casualness that provides plausible deniability. The negotiation process requires careful calibration of your response to Tenzin's territorial probes. Too little resistance encourages further encroachment, while excessive aggression could escalate the situation beyond your ability to manage successfully. You develop a strategy of graduated response, polite repositioning for minor incursions, direct eye contact, and strategic positioning for moderate challenges, and clear displacement behavior for serious boundary violations. Tenzin, despite his territorial ambitions, proves to be a reasonable neighbor, once appropriate boundaries are established and consistently maintained. He seems to respect yaks who demonstrate both the ability and willingness to defend their holdings, and your consistent but proportionate responses to his testing behavior eventually result in stable boundary agreements that work for both parties. The relationship with Tenzin teaches you that territorial disputes are mostly about who blinks first, but blinking at the appropriate time can actually strengthen your position. Knowing when to compromise, when to stand firm, and when to escalate demonstrates the kind of strategic thinking that successful territory management requires. Learning that territory disputes are mostly about who blinks first becomes a fundamental principle of yak conflict resolution. The vast majority of territorial challenges never progress beyond psychological posturing and symbolic positioning. Most potential conflicts resolve themselves when one party decides that the disputed resource isn't worth the energy expenditure required for sustained conflict. Your understanding of this principle develops through observation of numerous minor disputes throughout the grazing areas. You watch as yaks engage in elaborate rituals of territorial assertion that appear threatening but rarely result in actual physical confrontation. The displays serve important social functions, establishing relative status, testing commitment levels, and providing face-saving opportunities for strategic retreat. The who blinks first dynamic operates on multiple levels simultaneously. On the surface level, it's about who breaks eye contact, who moves away from contested space, or who demonstrates submission through body language. On deeper levels, it's about who has more to lose from prolonged conflict, who possesses greater stamina for sustained confrontation, and who can better afford the energy costs of territorial defense. Your strategy for territorial disputes emphasizes patience and strategic timing rather than aggressive assertion. You learn to project calm confidence while avoiding provocative behavior that might force escalation beyond anyone's preferred resolution level. This approach allows potential competitors to withdraw gracefully while maintaining their dignity, reducing the likelihood of grudges that could complicate future interactions. The blinking first principle also applies to resource allocation decisions within your own territory. You learn to distinguish between visitors who represent genuine challenges to your territorial claims and those who are simply passing through or seeking temporary access to resources. Appropriate timing of your responses prevents unnecessary conflicts while maintaining the credibility necessary for effective territorial management. Your brief rivalry with a particularly stubborn female named Pema provides an intensive education in the complexities of intergender territorial competition. Pema possesses the kind of persistent determination that makes her simultaneously admirable and exasperating as a territorial neighbor. She approaches boundary negotiations with the methodical thoroughness of someone conducting a scientific experiment in yak psychology. Pema's territorial strategy involves systematic testing of your resolve through incremental boundary adjustments. She gradually shifts her grazing patterns to claim progressively larger portions of the border areas between your territories, each adjustment small enough to avoid triggering immediate confrontation, but significant enough to represent meaningful territorial gain if left unchallenged. The rivalry develops into a complex chess match of territorial positioning, with each move requiring careful consideration of immediate tactical advantage and long-term strategic implications. Pema proves to be an exceptionally skilled opponent who forces you to develop more sophisticated approaches to territorial management than your previous experience with male competitors required. The gender dynamics of the rivalry add layers of complexity that don't exist in male-male territorial disputes. Social expectations about appropriate levels of aggression between males and females create constraints on both escalation and resolution strategies. You must assert your territorial rights without appearing to bully a female, while Pema must pursue her territorial ambitions without triggering male protective instincts that could complicate the conflict. The rivalry reaches its peak during a particularly dry period when high-quality grazing becomes scarce and territorial boundaries gain increased significance. Pema launches what amounts to a coordinated campaign to claim a water access corridor through your territory, using a combination of strategic positioning, alliance building with neighboring yaks, and persistent boundary testing that threatens to undermine your entire territorial structure. Your response to Pema's campaign requires mobilizing every territorial management skill you've developed, plus several new strategies learned through urgent necessity. You increase your territorial presence, recruit support from friendly neighbors, and engage in complex diplomatic negotiations that eventually result in a water access agreement that preserves your core territorial integrity while acknowledging Pema's legitimate need for reliable water access. The resolution of the rivalry with Pema provides mutual benefits that extend beyond the immediate territorial settlement. You've both demonstrated your respective competencies in territorial management, earning recognition as serious players in local resource politics. The experience also establishes a foundation of mutual respect that proves valuable in future cooperative endeavors. The art of resource management becomes crucial when you realize that making mediocre grass last all day requires more sophisticated planning than you initially anticipated. Your territorial claims provide access to finite resources that must be carefully allocated across time to ensure adequate nutrition without depleting the resource base that supports your territorial viability. Resource management involves understanding the regeneration patterns of your grass patches, the seasonal variations in growth rates, and the impact of weather conditions on resource availability. You learn to rotate your grazing patterns to allow recovery time for heavily used areas, to identify which sections can withstand intensive use and which require more careful conservation. The challenge of making mediocre grass last all day becomes an exercise in both strategic planning and psychological acceptance. Strategic planning involves timing your grazing to maximize satisfaction while minimizing resource depletion, eating the best grass when hunger is most acute, saving adequate portions for later meals, and identifying supplementary food sources for emergency situations. Psychological acceptance involves adjusting your expectations about meal quality to match available resources. You develop the ability to find satisfaction in mediocre grass by focusing on its positive qualities: adequate nutrition, reliable availability, freedom from digestive complications rather than dwelling on its limitations compared to premium vegetation. Your resource management strategy also incorporates weather-based contingency planning. You learn to increase consumption during abundant periods, to build energy reserves for anticipated shortages, and to reduce consumption during resource stress periods to extend the viability of your territorial holdings. This approach requires sophisticated forecasting abilities and the self-discipline necessary to implement consumption restrictions when current conditions would support higher intake levels. The development of effective resource management skills provides benefits beyond immediate survival needs. Your reputation as a responsible territorial manager makes you an attractive neighbor for other yaks seeking stable, low-conflict territorial relationships. Your resource management competence also positions you favorably for potential territorial expansion opportunities. Should adjacent properties become available through demographic changes in the local yak population, understanding that the best spots aren't always worth the drama represents a crucial lesson in cost-benefit analysis as applied to yak territorial politics. The most attractive grazing areas inevitably attract the most competition, creating situations where the energy costs of territorial defense may exceed the benefits gained from exclusive access to premium resources. Your education in this principle begins when you identify a truly exceptional patch of grass growing in a protected valley with ideal growing conditions, abundant water access, and scenery that would make the location desirable even without considering the superior food quality. Initial reconnaissance suggests that claiming this territory would represent a significant upgrade in your living situation and social status. Further investigation reveals that the exceptional territory comes with exceptional competition. At least 3 other yaks have expressed interest in the location, including 2 with significantly more territorial experience and 1 with powerful family connections that could complicate any territorial disputes. The level of competition suggests that successfully claiming and defending this territory would require substantial ongoing investment in conflict management and alliance maintenance. Your analysis of the cost-benefit ratio leads to the strategic decision to remain in your current, modestly adequate territory rather than pursuing the premium location. The decision involves accepting the reality that mediocre resources secured through sustainable effort often provide better long-term outcomes than premium resources obtained through unsustainable conflict. This principle extends beyond territorial decisions to broader life strategy questions. You learn to evaluate opportunities based on total cost of ownership rather than just immediate benefits, to consider your competitive advantages realistically when assessing potential challenges, and to recognize when contentment with adequate resources provides more security than pursuit of optimal resources. The wisdom of choosing sustainable adequacy over dramatic excellence proves particularly valuable during periods of resource scarcity, when yaks committed to defending premium territories face disproportionate stress, while yaks with modest territorial holdings maintain stable, low-conflict lifestyles. Your territorial philosophy of good enough sustainably positions you well for long-term success in the competitive environment of mountain resource management. The mating season arrives like nature's annual reminder that everyone gets awkward sometimes, regardless of how much dignity they've managed to accumulate during the rest of the year. The approaching season announces itself through subtle changes in the social atmosphere, increased attention to personal grooming, heightened awareness of the opposite sex, and a general feeling that the universe has decided to make everyone simultaneously more interesting and more ridiculous than usual. Your preparation for mating season involves a combination of practical considerations and psychological adjustment to the reality that you're now expected to participate in reproductive activities rather than simply observing them from a respectful distance. The transition from spectator to participant comes with performance anxiety that you're fairly certain isn't covered in any official yak instruction manual. The social dynamics of the herd shift noticeably as mating season approaches. Yaks, who normally interact with casual indifference, begin paying closer attention to each other's activities, appearance, and general availability. The males start engaging in subtle displays of physical prowess and territorial authority, while the females develop an increased interest in evaluating male competence through careful observation of daily behaviors. Your own approach to mating season preparation emphasizes practical readiness over dramatic display. You ensure your coat is in optimal condition through increased grooming attention. You intensify your territorial management activities to demonstrate competence and reliability, and you attempt to project an aura of calm confidence that suggests reproductive readiness without appearing desperate or overly eager. The first challenge of mating season involves learning to navigate the complex social protocols that govern courtship interactions. These protocols apparently weren't covered in your adolescent education, leaving you to learn through observation, experimentation, and the kind of trial and error process that inevitably involves public embarrassment and private reflection on your social skills. Your first attempt at courtship proves about as smooth as walking on ice while blindfolded, wearing oversized boots during an earthquake. The target of your romantic interest is a reasonably attractive female named Tsering, who has shown what you interpret as signs of potential interest, though in retrospect, those signs might have been mere politeness or coincidental timing rather than actual romantic encouragement. Your courtship strategy, such as it is, involves a combination of territorial display, impressive grazing performance, and what you hope will be interpreted as charming conversation through the medium of strategic grunting and meaningful glances. The execution of this strategy reveals significant gaps in your understanding of both female psychology and effective communication techniques. The territorial display portion of your courtship involves positioning yourself prominently within your best grazing areas, while engaged in activities that demonstrate your competence as a territorial manager and resource provider. You time these displays to coincide with Tsering's daily movement patterns, ensuring maximum visibility of your impressive standing around abilities and sophisticated grass selection techniques. Unfortunately, your territorial displays apparently communicate yak, who is trying too hard to look impressive, rather than naturally impressive yak going about his daily business. The difference is subtle but apparently significant, as Tsering's response suggests mild amusement, rather than the romantic interest you were hoping to inspire. The conversation attempts prove even less successful than the territorial displays. You discover that learning impressive grunting is apparently a skill you don't possess, despite months of what you thought was adequate vocal development. Your attempts at meaningful grunts come across as either too aggressive, too tentative, or mysteriously unintelligible, none of which contribute to the romantic atmosphere you're attempting to create. The most embarrassing moment of your courtship campaign occurs when you attempt to demonstrate your physical prowess through what you envision as a casual but impressive display of agility and strength. Your plan involves a graceful leap over a small boulder that will showcase your athletic abilities while appearing spontaneous and effortless. The execution involves misjudging both the height of the boulder and your own jumping capabilities, resulting in a collision that sends you sprawling in an undignified heap while the boulder remains smugly unmoved. Tsering's response to this display suggests that your athletic demonstration has been less impressive than intended, though she politely pretends not to notice your subsequent attempts to regain dignity while extracting yourself from the awkward position. The competition with Norbu adds another layer of complexity to your romantic endeavors. Norbu possesses the kind of natural charisma that makes standing around look like a deliberate artistic performance rather than the default yak activity. He has somehow mastered the art of projecting confident availability without appearing eager, competent authority, without seeming arrogant, and casual interest without suggesting desperation. Norbu's approach to courtship emphasizes subtle demonstration of desirable qualities rather than obvious display of romantic intentions. He positions himself where interested females can observe his daily activities without feeling pressured by direct attention. His territorial management appears effortlessly successful. His social interactions demonstrate appropriate confidence and humor, and his general demeanor suggests that he would be a reliable partner without being boring. Your attempts to compete with Norbu's natural advantages lead to increasingly elaborate efforts that succeed mainly in highlighting the contrast between his effortless competence and your obvious trying. You experiment with various approaches: strategic positioning, enhanced grooming, territorial improvements, and conversational innovations, none of which produce the desired effect of making you appear more attractive than your naturally charismatic competitor. The competition reaches its climax during a territorial display incident where both you and Norbu attempt to demonstrate your respective qualifications to a group of observing females. Norbu's demonstration involves a casual but impressive defense of his territorial boundaries against a minor incursion, handled with exactly the right combination of firmness and restraint to suggest competent authority without unnecessary aggression. Your corresponding demonstration involves overreacting to a minor territorial challenge in a way that escalates the situation beyond reasonable proportions, requiring intervention from Elder Chompa to prevent unnecessary conflict and making you appear both incompetent and lacking in judgment. The contrast between Norbu's measured competence and your excessive enthusiasm effectively ends any realistic hope of competing successfully for the same romantic targets. The brief success with Dolma provides a much-needed boost to your confidence and a valuable lesson in the importance of appropriate matching between romantic partners. Dolma apparently appreciates your consistent mediocrity in a way that more ambitious females do not, suggesting that your romantic strategy should focus on partners who value reliability and steadiness over dramatic charisma and impressive displays. Dolma's attraction to your qualities initially seems backhanded. She explicitly mentions your dependable ordinariness and your thoroughly adequate territorial management as positive features that distinguish you from more flashy but potentially unreliable males. However, you gradually realize that these characteristics represent genuine advantages for yaks seeking stable, long-term partnership rather than exciting but temporary romantic adventure. Your relationship with Dolma develops through shared appreciation for the practical aspects of yak life. Efficient grazing strategies, reasonable territorial management, and the kind of steady companionship that doesn't require constant entertainment or dramatic gestures. You discover that romantic compatibility can be based on complementary approaches to daily life rather than passionate attraction or impressive individual achievements. The courtship process with Dolma emphasizes mutual evaluation of partnership potential rather than one-sided attempts at impression management. You spend time observing each other's daily routines, territorial management styles, and social interaction patterns, gradually building confidence that your respective approaches to life are compatible and mutually supportive. The success with Dolma teaches you valuable lessons about romantic strategy that extend beyond this particular relationship. You learn that authenticity often produces better results than performance, that matching with compatible partners is more important than pursuing the most obviously desirable partners, and that romantic success may depend more on offering genuine value than on impressive display. The realization that raising offspring involves more work than you anticipated comes as something of a shock, despite your years of observing other yaks engaged in parental responsibilities. The theoretical understanding that young yaks require care and guidance proves inadequate preparation for the practical reality of being personally responsible for another creature's survival, development, and education. The pregnancy period provides time for psychological adjustment to the concept of parenthood, but the adjustment process reveals significant gaps in your preparation for the responsibilities ahead. You begin paying closer attention to parent-offspring interactions throughout the herd, attempting to learn through observation what you apparently missed during your own upbringing, when you were focused on being cared for rather than learning how to provide care. Your crash course in parental responsibility involves learning to recognize the signs of pregnancy complications, understanding the nutritional requirements for supporting both Dolma and the developing offspring, and preparing appropriate shelter and protection for the birthing process. These responsibilities require a level of attentiveness and forward planning that challenges your previously adequate organizational skills. The most significant adjustment involves recognizing that your decisions now affect not just your own welfare, but the welfare of your partner and offspring. This responsibility dramatically changes your approach to risk assessment, territorial management, and resource allocation. Activities that seemed reasonably safe when the consequences affected only yourself now require much more conservative evaluation when failure could impact your family's survival. Your first calf arrives as a small, confused version of yourself, who appears to believe that you know what you're doing. This faith proves both touching and terrifying, as you're acutely aware that your parental qualifications consist mainly of enthusiasm and good intentions, rather than extensive experience or specialized training. The calf, a female Yuan Dolma named Pema after your former territorial rival, though for more positive reasons, demonstrates the kind of helpless dependency that makes your own early struggles seem impressively competent by comparison. She requires assistance with basic functions like standing, walking, and finding food, all of which you remember being able to do independently since practically birth, though your memory may be somewhat self-serving. Your approach to parenting emphasizes patient demonstration over detailed explanation, partly because yak communication doesn't lend itself to complex instruction, and partly because you're learning many of the necessary skills yourself, as circumstances require them. You find yourself drawing on half-remembered lessons from your own upbringing, supplemented by contemporary observation of other parents and a considerable amount of improvisation. The early weeks of parenthood provide intensive education in the practical aspects of child rearing, protecting the calf from environmental hazards, ensuring adequate nutrition for both nursing mother and developing offspring, and providing the kind of stable, secure environment that supports healthy development. These responsibilities require sustained attention and energy that significantly impacts your other activities. The psychological adjustment to parenthood proves as challenging as the practical responsibilities. You gradually develop the kind of protective instincts that make you view potential threats through the lens of family security rather than personal risk. Minor environmental challenges that you would normally ignore or accept as part of mountain life now trigger careful evaluation of their potential impact on your family's safety and well-being. The experience of watching Pema develop from helpless newborn to increasingly competent young yak provides unexpected satisfaction and meaning to your daily routine. Her gradual mastery of basic skills, first steps, successful grazing, social interaction with other young yaks creates a sense of accomplishment that differs qualitatively from your previous achievements in territorial management or personal survival. Parenthood also provides new perspective on your own place within the herd's social structure. Your status shifts from individual adult to family head, bringing increased respect from other yaks but also increased expectations for responsible behavior and community contribution. Other parents begin treating you as a peer rather than a younger adult, acknowledging your transition to full adult status through the shared experience of child-rearing responsibilities. The long-term implications of parenthood extend beyond the immediate challenges of caring for young offspring. You begin thinking about legacy, community responsibility, and the kind of environment you want to create for future generations. These considerations influence your approach to territorial management, resource conservation, and social relationships in ways that prioritize long-term stability over short-term advantage. As Pema grows more independent and your confidence in parental skills increases, you begin to understand why reproduction represents such a significant milestone in yak development. The experience provides not just genetic continuation but personal growth opportunities that wouldn't be available through individual achievement alone. Parenthood forces you to develop capabilities you didn't know you possessed, and to find meaning in responsibilities that initially seemed overwhelming. The successful navigation of early parenthood establishes you as a competent adult member of the community with a track record of meeting major life challenges. This reputation enhances your social standing and provides a foundation for future leadership opportunities within the herd's informal but influential decision-making processes. You've achieved peak yak status, which in the world of yak accomplishments means becoming impressively unimpressive. This paradoxical achievement represents the culmination of years spent perfecting the art of being so thoroughly adequate at everything that your adequacy becomes, in its own way, remarkable. You've mastered the delicate balance between competence and mediocrity that defines successful yak existence, capable enough to handle whatever challenges arise, but not so capable that anyone expects exceptional performance. Peak yak status manifests in subtle ways that only other yaks truly appreciate. Your coat has reached its optimal density and coverage, providing maximum warmth with minimal maintenance requirements. Your grazing technique has evolved to perfect efficiency. You can extract maximum nutrition from mediocre grass while expending minimum energy on the chewing process. Your territorial management operates on autopilot, requiring only occasional attention to maintain boundaries and resource allocation. Most importantly, you've developed the kind of unflappable demeanor that suggests you've seen everything the mountain can throw at you, and found it all mildly tedious. This reputation for calm competence makes you an anchor point for the rest of the herd. The yak others look to when they need reassurance that whatever is happening isn't worth getting excited about. Your reputation as that yak who's always there, doing yak things, becomes a cornerstone of your social identity. Other yaks begin referring to you not by name but by function. Ask the steady one, or let's see what the reliable one thinks. This functional identity reflects your role as the herd's equivalent of a comfortable piece of furniture, always present, always useful, never surprising. Being always there involves more skill than it initially appears. It requires the ability to maintain consistent presence without becoming intrusive, to be available for consultation without seeming eager for attention, and to project reliability without appearing boring. You've learned to occupy space in a way that feels natural and reassuring, rather than overwhelming or demanding. The doing yak things aspect of your reputation encompasses your mastery of all the routine activities that define successful yak existence. Your grazing appears effortless because you've internalized the decision-making processes that guide grass selection, timing, and efficiency optimization. Your standing looks comfortable because you've learned to distribute weight and adjust posture automatically. Your social interactions seem natural because you've developed intuitive understanding of yak etiquette and communication protocols. This reputation for consistent yakness makes you valuable as a reference point for younger yaks learning appropriate behavior and as a stabilizing influence during periods of herd stress or uncertainty. Your presence communicates that whatever dramatic events might be occurring, normal yak life continues, and there's comfort in that continuity. Mastering the art of looking busy while accomplishing very little represents perhaps your most sophisticated adult skill. This ability involves projecting an aura of purposeful activity while actually maintaining the kind of relaxed, energy-conserving lifestyle that maximizes long-term sustainability. It's the difference between being actively lazy and being strategically inactive. The technique requires careful attention to the visual elements of productive activity. Maintaining appropriate movement patterns, engaging in seasonal behaviors at expected times, and positioning yourself in locations that suggest important but undefined responsibilities. You learn to graze with the kind of focused attention that looks like serious work, while actually being quite meditative and restful. Your mastery of productive-looking inactivity proves particularly valuable during peak tourist season, when human observers seem to prefer yaks who appear to be engaged in authentic yak activities rather than obviously lounging around doing nothing. You can provide the appearance of wild yak behavior while actually enjoying a quite comfortable lifestyle with minimal stress or genuine effort. The skill also helps manage expectations within the herd's social structure. By appearing moderately busy, you avoid being assigned additional responsibilities while maintaining the respect that comes from contributing to community welfare. You've found the sweet spot between obvious laziness, which would damage your reputation, and obvious overachievement, which would result in increased expectations and workload. The respect that comes from surviving long enough to have opinions represents a form of social capital that you've accumulated gradually over years of not dying and not making spectacularly bad decisions. Longevity in the yak world isn't just about biological survival. It's about developing the kind of judgment that comes from experiencing multiple seasons, weather patterns, and social situations without catastrophic failure. Your opinions carry weight not because they're necessarily brilliant, but because they're informed by extensive first-hand experience with the practical realities of mountain life. When you suggest that certain weather patterns indicate approaching storms, other yaks listen because you've been wrong before, but you've been right more often than you've been wrong. When you evaluate grass quality or territorial disputes, your assessment reflects years of accumulated data about what works and what doesn't. The transition from yak whose opinions don't matter to yak whose opinions are sought and considered happens gradually, marked by small instances of validation when your predictions prove accurate or your advice proves helpful. Each successful prediction or useful suggestion builds your reputation as a yak worth consulting on matters of practical importance. Having opinions that matter also comes with the responsibility of forming those opinions thoughtfully and expressing them appropriately. You learn to distinguish between situations that require immediate, decisive input and situations where your opinion should be offered only if requested. You develop the ability to express disagreement with other respected yaks without causing unnecessary conflict or undermining group cohesion. Your role as unofficial weather predictor emerges organically from your combination of observational skills, accumulated experience, and willingness to commit to predictions that can be proven right or wrong by subsequent events. Weather prediction in the mountains involves reading multiple environmental signals and synthesizing them into forecasts that help the herd make informed decisions about movement, shelter, and activity planning. Your weather prediction methodology combines traditional indicators, cloud formations, wind patterns, animal behavior, with personal observations about subtler environmental changes that correlate with weather shifts. You notice that certain combinations of humidity, air pressure, and mountain echo patterns consistently precede specific types of weather events, allowing you to make predictions with reasonable accuracy about general trends, if not precise timing. The admission that you're wrong about 40% of the time represents a crucial element of your credibility as a weather predictor. By acknowledging the limitations of your forecasting ability, you manage expectations appropriately and maintain trust, even when your predictions prove inaccurate. Other yaks appreciate honest assessment of uncertainty more than false confidence that leads to poor decision-making. Your weather prediction role also involves knowing when not to make predictions. Some weather patterns are too complex or variable to forecast reliably, and acknowledging uncertainty in these situations prevents the kind of overconfident predictions that could damage your reputation and lead to poor herd planning decisions. The day younger yaks started asking for your advice represents a simultaneously flattering and terrifying milestone in your social development. Being sought out for guidance indicates that you've achieved recognition as a competent adult whose experience and judgment are valuable resources for yaks facing unfamiliar challenges. However, it also means accepting responsibility for potentially influencing important decisions made by yaks who lack the experience to evaluate your advice critically. Your first advisory consultation involves a young male seeking guidance on territorial selection. His question seems straightforward: which of two potential grazing areas would provide better long-term prospects? But your analysis reveals complex factors involving resource sustainability, competitive pressure, seasonal variation, and the questioner's personal capabilities and preferences. Providing useful advice requires balancing honest assessment of the available options with recognition that the young yak must ultimately make his own decisions and live with the consequences. You learn to offer analysis and perspective rather than definitive recommendations, helping advisees understand relevant factors while respecting their autonomy and need to develop independent judgment. The advisory role evolves to include consultations on various topics: mate selection, conflict resolution, resource management, and general life strategy questions. Each consultation teaches you something about the art of guidance, how to ask clarifying questions, how to share relevant experience without imposing your solutions on different situations, and how to provide support without creating dependency. The terrifying aspect of being asked for advice involves recognizing that your guidance could significantly impact other yaks' life outcomes. Poor advice could lead to territorial failures, relationship disasters, or resource management problems that create long-term difficulties for yaks who trusted your judgment. This responsibility motivates careful consideration of your responses and humble acknowledgement of the limitations of your perspective. Over time, you develop a consultation style that emphasizes collaborative problem-solving rather than authoritative pronouncement. You help advisees think through their situations systematically, share relevant experiences and observations, and support their decision-making processes without taking responsibility for their ultimate choices. This approach proves more helpful than directive advice and creates better learning opportunities for developing yaks. Becoming the yak others follow happens gradually and somewhat accidentally, mostly because you seem to know where you're going even when you're making it up as you go along. Leadership in yak society doesn't involve dramatic declarations or impressive displays of authority. It's more about projecting sufficient confidence in your direction and decisions that other yaks find it easier to follow you than to figure out their own plans. Your leadership style emphasizes calm competence over charismatic inspiration. When the herd faces decisions about daily movement patterns, grazing location selection, or response to environmental challenges, you provide steady input based on practical considerations rather than emotional appeals or dramatic gestures. Other yaks begin deferring to your judgment, not because you demand authority, but because your suggestions consistently prove reasonable and well considered. The transition to informal leadership begins during routine group activities, when your navigation choices or timing decisions prove successful, often enough that other yaks start following your lead automatically. You notice this happening gradually. First, one or two yaks adopting your movement patterns, then small groups gravitating toward your chosen grazing areas. Finally, larger portions of the herd looking to you for direction during uncertain situations. Your leadership approach involves leading by example rather than explicit direction. You demonstrate appropriate responses to various situations through your own behavior, allowing other yaks to observe and adopt successful strategies without feeling instructed or managed. This indirect leadership style suits yak social preferences for individual autonomy within collective cooperation. The most challenging aspect of informal leadership involves managing the balance between providing guidance and maintaining the relaxed social atmosphere that makes yak life pleasant. Too much active leadership creates stress and resistance, while too little guidance leaves the group vulnerable to poor collective decisions during challenging situations. Your brief stint as alpha male proves exhausting and overrated, teaching you valuable lessons about the difference between informal influence and formal authority. The alpha position becomes available when the previous alpha, an impressive but aging male named Thupton, decides to step down from the demands of active leadership in favor of a more contemplative retirement focused on advanced grass contemplation and strategic napping. The competition for alpha status involves several qualified candidates, but your combination of proven judgment, territorial competence, and general reliability makes you a consensus choice for yaks seeking stable, competent leadership without unnecessary drama or aggressive dominance displays. Your selection represents recognition of your practical capabilities rather than your raw physical prowess or intimidating presence. Alpha responsibilities prove more complex and demanding than your previous leadership experience prepared you to handle. The role involves making decisions that affect the entire herd's welfare, mediating conflicts between individual yaks with competing interests, and maintaining overall group cohesion during periods of environmental stress or social tension. The decision-making burden of alpha status requires constant attention to multiple factors simultaneously: resource availability, weather patterns, territorial boundaries, social dynamics, and the varying needs and capabilities of individual herd members. Every choice involves trade-offs that benefit some yaks while potentially disadvantaging others, creating ongoing diplomatic challenges that prove mentally exhausting. Your alpha tenure lasts exactly 1 season before you voluntarily step down in favor of a more ambitious candidate who seems to actually enjoy the constant responsibility and social complexity of formal leadership. The experience teaches you that while you're capable of handling leadership responsibilities, the energy costs exceed the personal satisfaction you derive from the role. Learning that leadership is mostly about making decisions when everyone else is too tired to care becomes a fundamental insight into the practical dynamics of group decision-making. Many leadership situations arise not because someone seeks authority, but because circumstances require decisions, and nobody else wants the responsibility of choosing among imperfect options. Your most effective leadership contributions occur during crisis situations, when normal decision-making processes break down due to stress, uncertainty, or conflicting priorities among herd members. In these moments, your willingness to assess available information, consider likely outcomes, and commit to specific courses of action provides the decisive input necessary for group coordination. The too tired to care dynamic operates on multiple levels. Physical fatigue from environmental challenges reduces yaks' capacity for complex decision-making, making them more willing to accept reasonable suggestions from anyone willing to take responsibility. Emotional fatigue from ongoing stress or conflict creates similar openness to guidance that resolves immediate problems without requiring extensive debate or consensus building. Your leadership style capitalizes on these dynamics by providing calm, practical suggestions during moments when other yaks are overwhelmed by circumstances or paralyzed by conflicting options. You learn to recognize when groups need decisive input and when they prefer collaborative discussion, timing your interventions to maximize effectiveness while minimizing resistance. The responsibility of knowing which grass is safe versus which grass leads to regret represents one of your most crucial leadership contributions. Your extensive experience with grass evaluation, combined with systematic observation of cause and effect relationships between grass consumption and subsequent digestive experiences, creates expertise that proves invaluable for preventing herd-wide health problems. Grass safety assessment involves multiple factors: visual inspection for obvious problems like mold or contamination, smell evaluation for subtle indicators of spoilage or toxicity, and knowledge of seasonal variations that affect the safety and nutritional value of different plant species. Your assessment system incorporates both immediate safety concerns and longer-term health impacts of various dietary choices. The leadership aspect of grass evaluation involves communicating your assessments effectively to other herd members without creating unnecessary anxiety or undermining their confidence in their own judgment. You learn to distinguish between situations requiring absolute prohibition of certain vegetation and situations where guidance about optimal choices enhances collective welfare without restricting individual autonomy. Your grass expertise proves particularly valuable during environmental stress periods, when food scarcity forces the herd to consider vegetation that wouldn't normally be attractive options. Your ability to identify marginal but safe food sources, evaluate the relative risks of different desperation grazing choices, and provide guidance on preparation techniques for challenging vegetation helps prevent malnutrition and digestive disasters during difficult seasons. Your first successful defense of the herd from a confused snow leopard provides a defining moment in your leadership development, demonstrating your ability to respond effectively to genuine emergencies while maintaining the calm competence that characterizes your leadership style. The incident occurs during early spring, when food scarcity apparently drives a young snow leopard to investigate the herd as a potential food source. The snow leopard's approach creates immediate tension within the herd, as individual yaks respond with varying combinations of alertness, anxiety, and protective instinct toward vulnerable members. The situation requires coordinated response to ensure collective safety, while avoiding unnecessary escalation that could trigger aggressive behavior from a predator that might otherwise be deterred through appropriate defensive positioning. Your response to the threat involves quickly assessing the snow leopard's behavior patterns, organizing the herd into protective formations that shield vulnerable members while presenting a unified front, and implementing deterrent strategies that discourage predation without triggering defensive aggression from a cornered predator. The confrontation resolves without violence when the snow leopard, faced with organized resistance from a large group of formidable prey animals, decides that easier hunting opportunities probably exist elsewhere and withdraws to pursue less challenging food sources. Your management of the situation earns recognition for effective crisis leadership that protected the herd through calm, strategic response rather than dramatic heroics. The realization that being in charge means everyone blames you when things go wrong represents perhaps the most sobering aspect of leadership responsibility. When collective decisions produce negative outcomes, the yak, who provided guidance or made final choices, becomes the target for frustration and criticism, regardless of whether alternative decisions would have produced better results. This dynamic becomes apparent during a resource management decision that seems reasonable at the time, but produces unexpected negative consequences when weather patterns shift in unpredictable ways. Your recommendation to concentrate grazing in specific areas during early autumn helps optimize grass quality during favorable conditions, but leaves the herd vulnerable when early winter weather limits access to backup grazing areas. The criticism following this decision teaches you about the lonely aspects of leadership, responsibility, and the importance of making decisions based on best available information, while accepting that negative outcomes may result from factors beyond your control or prediction. You learn to distinguish between decisions that were wrong based on available information and decisions that proved wrong due to unforeseeable circumstances. Managing blame and criticism becomes an essential leadership skill, involving clear communication about decision-making, rationale, honest acknowledgement of mistakes, and appropriate sharing of credit for successful outcomes. You develop the ability to accept responsibility for poor decisions while educating critics about the complex factors that influence leadership choices and the inherent uncertainty involved in many group decisions. Finding the perfect balance between effort and results becomes your signature achievement during this period, representing the culmination of years spent optimizing the relationship between energy expenditure and life satisfaction. You've learned to identify the minimum effective dose of effort required to maintain adequate comfort, safety, and social standing, while maximizing the time and energy available for the simple pleasures of yak existence. This balance manifests in every aspect of your daily routine. Your grazing patterns achieve maximum nutritional value with minimum travel and search time through systematic knowledge of seasonal variations in grass quality and location. Your territorial management maintains necessary boundaries through strategic presence and positioning, rather than exhausting constant patrolling. Your social interactions provide appropriate community connection without the energy drain of unnecessary drama or conflict. The effort results optimization extends to your approach to weather management, predator awareness, and resource conservation. You've developed the ability to distinguish between situations requiring immediate active response and situations where patient waiting produces better outcomes with less energy expenditure. This discrimination allows you to reserve your energy for genuinely important challenges while maintaining appropriate awareness of your environment. Your reputation for efficient living attracts attention from other yaks seeking to improve their own effort results ratios. You become an informal consultant on lifestyle optimization, sharing techniques for maximizing comfort and satisfaction while minimizing unnecessary stress and energy waste. This advisory role provides additional social value while requiring minimal additional effort on your part. The perfect balance you've achieved also includes knowing when to break your own efficiency rules. Some situations benefit from extra effort that exceeds strict optimization calculations, helping community members in need, responding to unusual opportunities, or simply enjoying occasional indulgences that enhance life satisfaction without significantly compromising overall efficiency. Your legendary discovery of the secret grazing spot near the hot springs represents the peak achievement of your exploration and resource identification skills. This discovery occurs during a routine territorial survey when you notice unusual vegetation patterns that suggest favorable growing conditions in an area that most yaks overlook due to its slightly inconvenient location and unimpressive initial appearance. The investigation of this area reveals a small valley where geothermal activity creates a microclimate that supports exceptional grass growth throughout most of the year. The location provides not only superior food quality, but also natural windbreak, temperature moderation, and scenic beauty that makes grazing there a genuinely pleasant experience rather than simple necessity. Your approach to this discovery emphasizes careful evaluation and strategic utilization rather than immediate exploitation. You study the area's capacity, seasonal variations, and sustainability factors before beginning regular use. You also consider the social implications of your discovery, whether to share the location with select friends, keep it secret for personal use, or integrate it into community resources. The decision to share the discovery with a small group of trusted community members creates an exclusive grazing society that enhances everyone's quality of life while maintaining the location's sustainability and special character. This approach demonstrates your developing wisdom about resource management and community relationships. The secret grazing spot becomes legendary, not just for its quality, but for representing the kind of patient observation and thoughtful exploration that yields exceptional rewards for yaks willing to look beyond obvious options. Your discovery inspires other yaks to approach their own territorial exploration with greater attention to subtle environmental indicators and hidden opportunities. The establishment of your daily routine represents the transformation of accumulated experience and refined preferences into a masterpiece of efficient boredom that optimizes your quality of life while minimizing unnecessary effort or stress. Your routine incorporates optimal timing for various activities, preferred locations for different types of grazing, and strategic scheduling that takes advantage of environmental patterns and social rhythms. Your morning routine begins with territorial assessment, a brief survey of your immediate environment that provides information about overnight changes in weather, potential security issues, and resource availability. This assessment, conducted while engaging in gentle stretching and grooming activities, efficiently combines multiple necessary functions into a single pleasant period of morning preparation. The grazing schedule that forms the core of your daily routine reflects sophisticated understanding of grass quality variations throughout the day, your own digestive rhythms, and social interaction opportunities. Morning grazing focuses on tender vegetation that provides gentle awakening for your digestive system. Midday grazing emphasizes high-quality nutrition during peak energy hours. Evening grazing combines social interaction with resource utilization for both sustenance and community connection. Your routine includes strategic rest periods positioned to take advantage of favorable weather conditions, scenic locations, and social opportunities, while providing necessary recovery time between more demanding activities. These rest periods serve multiple functions: physical restoration, social observation, environmental monitoring, and the simple pleasure of contemplating the landscape. The routine also incorporates flexibility mechanisms that allow adaptation to changing circumstances without abandoning the basic structure that provides comfort and efficiency. You've learned to distinguish between core routine elements that should be maintained consistently and peripheral activities that can be modified based on daily conditions and opportunities. Teaching younger yaks the subtle art of not caring about most things becomes one of your most valuable contributions to herd education and community welfare. This teaching involves helping developing yaks understand the difference between appropriate concern about genuinely important matters and wasteful anxiety about circumstances beyond their control or influence. Your teaching methodology emphasizes demonstration rather than explanation, showing through your own behavior how to maintain appropriate awareness of environmental conditions and social dynamics while avoiding the exhausting hypervigilance that characterizes anxious, inexperienced yaks. You model the calm attention that distinguishes genuine alertness from nervous overreaction. The curriculum of not caring covers several important topics, distinguishing between problems requiring immediate action and problems that resolve themselves through patient waiting, recognizing when other yaks drama represents entertainment rather than genuine crisis, and understanding that most environmental challenges are temporary inconveniences rather than existential threats. Your teaching approach includes guided practice in selective attention, helping younger yaks learn to focus their concern and energy on matters where their attention can make a meaningful difference, while developing the ability to observe other situations with detached interest rather than personal investment. The most advanced lesson in the art of not caring involves learning when to care intensely about specific situations that genuinely matter, while maintaining overall equanimity about the general flow of events. This discrimination represents sophisticated wisdom that distinguishes mature indifference from immature apathy. Your reputation as a yak who's seen everything and wasn't particularly impressed becomes a source of both respect and humor within the community. This reputation reflects your development of the kind of broad perspective that comes from experiencing multiple cycles of seasonal change, social drama, environmental challenge, and routine daily life without losing your essential equanimity. The seen everything aspect of your reputation involves having experienced enough variety in yak life that few situations surprise you or trigger dramatic emotional responses. Your reactions to new challenges, social conflicts, or environmental changes tend to be measured and practical rather than excited or anxious, providing stability and reassurance for other community members. The wasn't particularly impressed element adds a touch of humor to your wisdom that prevents your experience from seeming intimidating or pretentious. Your ability to acknowledge that even significant events are, in the larger context of mountain life, fairly routine occurrences helps maintain perspective and prevents the kind of drama escalation that exhausts everyone involved. This reputation makes you valuable as a reality check during periods when other herd members might be inclined toward overreaction or excessive concern about current circumstances. Your perspective helps maintain community equilibrium by providing calm assessment of situations and gentle reminder that most crises pass without requiring heroic intervention. The season you spent mostly standing in the same spot represents perhaps the ultimate achievement in yak lifestyle optimization. The discovery that perfect contentment sometimes involves doing absolutely nothing while appearing to be engaged in purposeful activity. This period occurs during an exceptionally comfortable summer, when weather conditions, grass quality, and social harmony align to create ideal circumstances for advanced relaxation. Your chosen spot offers everything necessary for sustained comfort: excellent grass quality within easy reach, optimal wind protection, good drainage, scenic views, and convenient access to water and social interaction. The location's virtues become apparent gradually, as you realize that moving elsewhere would require giving up multiple advantages without gaining proportional benefits. The decision to remain essentially stationary for an entire season represents confident commitment to the principle that sometimes the best action is no action. Your willingness to resist the social pressure toward constant movement and activity demonstrates sophisticated understanding of your own needs and preferences. Other yaks initially interpret your stationary behavior as possible illness or depression, but your obvious contentment and continued health gradually earns their respect for your unconventional lifestyle choice. Your seasonal experiment becomes legendary as an example of taking the yak philosophy of relaxed living to its logical conclusion. The period teaches important lessons about the difference between stagnation and contentment, between laziness and strategic inactivity, and between social conformity and authentic self-expression. Your ability to remain perfectly satisfied in one location while maintaining appropriate social connection and environmental awareness demonstrates advanced mastery of yak existence. The respect you earn from this period of deliberate immobility reflects recognition that your choice represents confidence and wisdom rather than avoidance or failure. Other yaks begin to understand that true mastery of yak life might involve the courage to do exactly what feels right, regardless of external expectations or conventional activity patterns. Your joints start making commentary on weather changes before they happen, providing a personal meteorological service that's more reliable than your previous weather prediction methods and significantly more annoying than you anticipated. The commentary begins as occasional stiffness that seems to correlate with atmospheric pressure changes, but gradually develops into a comprehensive early warning system that announces incoming weather with the enthusiasm of a town crier made of cartilage and accumulated resentment. The knee that you injured during your adolescent prayer flag incident now serves as a barometric pressure gauge, aching dully 12 hours before storm systems arrive and creaking ominously when temperature changes approach. Your left shoulder, strained during an overly ambitious territorial display years ago, provides detailed forecasts about wind direction and intensity through a complex system of twinges and shooting pains that you've learned to interpret with meteorological precision. This joint-based weather service proves remarkably accurate, correctly predicting approximately 85% of significant weather events with enough advance notice to be practically useful. Other yaks begin consulting your physical discomfort levels as a supplement to traditional weather signs, creating the peculiar situation where your aging body becomes a valued community resource. The irony of becoming more useful as a weather predictor, through physical deterioration rather than accumulated wisdom, isn't lost on you. Your joints have achieved the kind of reliable forecasting accuracy that your conscious weather analysis never quite managed, suggesting that sometimes the body knows things the mind hasn't figured out yet. Learning to manage the balance between useful joint-based weather information and the natural tendency to complain about increasing physical discomfort becomes an ongoing challenge. You develop strategies for sharing meteorological insights without turning every conversation into a recitation of your various aches and pains, though the temptation to provide detailed updates on your physical condition grows stronger with each passing season. The gradual shift from doing things to supervising things represents a fundamental change in your relationship with daily activities and community responsibilities. This transition happens so gradually that you don't initially notice the change one day. You're participating directly in territorial maintenance, and the next day you're standing nearby, offering suggestions while younger yaks handle the actual work. Supervision, you discover, requires different skills than direct participation. Instead of managing your own energy and technique, you must evaluate other yaks' approaches, provide guidance without micromanaging, and resist the urge to take over when their methods differ from your preferred techniques. The shift from doing to supervising forces you to articulate knowledge that you've previously applied instinctively. Your supervisory style emphasizes gentle guidance over detailed instruction, partly because yak communication doesn't lend itself to complex explanations, and partly because you've learned that most skills develop better through practice and observation than through theoretical explanation. You perfect the art of strategic positioning that allows younger yaks to observe your techniques while maintaining enough distance to develop their own approaches. The supervision role also involves learning when not to supervise. Some situations benefit from allowing younger yaks to make mistakes and learn from consequences, even when your experience could prevent those mistakes. The wisdom to distinguish between learning opportunities and genuine safety risks becomes a crucial aspect of effective elder guidance. Younger yaks often seek your wisdom, unaware that much of it came from lucky improvisation rather than grand strategy. Their questions lead you to unpack decisions once made by instinct, now reframed as lessons in risk, rest, and restraint. You respond honestly, crediting luck where due, while distilling the useful patterns that emerged over time. Wisdom, as it turns out, often looks like speaking slowly while tired. You conserve energy, model calm, and recognize that many problems solve themselves. This strategic apathy isn't laziness, it's judgment. You don't preach it, you live it. Your motto, chew slower and grunt less, captures your core approach: patience, clarity, and trust in instinct over frantic overthinking. You allow younger yaks space to stumble, supporting them without micromanaging. Teaching has become part guidance, part performance, part endurance. Looking back, you've shifted from chasing prestige to valuing peace, from urgency to acceptance. You now admire the stability you once dismissed as boring. What once felt ordinary now seems deeply earned. Your greatest insight: most things aren't worth the energy they demand. The dramas, ambitions, and projects of your youth often resolved on their own, or weren't that important to begin with. You learn to invest in what truly matters: relationships, real emergencies, and survival. Your final seasons weren't marked by greatness but by presence. You were dependable, calm, and quietly influential. And when you were gone, the grass still grew, the wind still blew, and the herd remembered you exactly the way you'd hoped.